Just water, please, for both of us.
Mom, that boy's hungry.
Finalized by Friday.
A CEO and her son walked into a diner for breakfast. They saw a father and son sharing one glass of water. Too poor to order food. What the 6-year-old did next shocked everyone. But what the CEO discovered 6 months later will make you believe in second chances. The late autumn sun barely warmed the New Mexico morning as Evelyn Hart stood in her pristine kitchen, cradling a coffee mug between her hands. Outside the wide windows, Santa Fe stretched beneath a pale blue sky, the kind of sky her late husband used to photograph on weekends. Inside, the house felt too quiet, too clean, too much like a museum of memories she couldn't quite let go of. At 42, Evelyn had built an empire from ground zero. Hart Development Corporation wasn't just successful, it was ruthless, efficient, and exactly what the business world expected from a widow who refused to break. She had transformed grief into ambition, turning every sleepless night into another acquisition, another development project, another reason to avoid sitting still with her thoughts. Mom. 6-year-old Max swung his legs on the kitchen table, his cereal spoon creating tiny milk tsunamis in his bowl. Can we go somewhere today? Somewhere that's not your office. The words hit her like a gentle accusation. When had her office become their second home? When had Saturday mornings shifted from pancake adventures to spreadsheet reviews with Max coloring quietly in the corner of her conference room? Evelyn set down her tablet, mid-email about a contract negotiation, and really looked at her son. His light brown hair stuck up in the back, still mussed from sleep. His eyes, the same warm hazel as his father's, watched her with patient hope. "Yeah, buddy," she said softly, feeling something loosen in her chest. "Let's go get some pancakes. Real ones, from a real diner." Max's face lit up like she'd promised Disneyland. 20 minutes later, they were driving down Old Santa Fe Trail, the radio playing an old country song that made her think of Michael. The way he used to tap the steering wheel, the way he'd sing off-key and make Max giggle. The memory didn't hurt quite as much as it used to. Now it felt more like a warm hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "It looks like a painting out there," Max whispered, face pressed against the window. She glanced at the golden hills and adobe homes tucked behind low fences. "It really does." The Sunset Grill appeared suddenly, its wooden sign leaning slightly to the left as though exhausted from decades of standing. The parking lot was half full with pickup trucks and older sedans. Not the kind of place Evelyn usually frequented, but something about it felt right. Inside, the diner smelled like a childhood she'd never had. Warm syrup, fresh coffee, bacon sizzling on a griddle somewhere out of sight. Black and white photos of old Santa Fe lined the walls. The booths were worn, vinyl cracked in places, but everything felt lived in and honest. A tired but friendly waitress seated them near the window. Max immediately pressed his nose against the glass, watching cars pull into the lot. "Can I get chocolate pancakes?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "We'll see," Evelyn teased, though Saturday mornings were made for saying yes to small things. The bell above the door chimed. Evelyn glanced about habit. CEO instincts never quite turned off, and saw a man enter slowly, as if hoping not to be noticed. He wore a faded work shirt with a name patch barely visible. Jeans had lost their color years ago, and boots held together with what looked like determination and duct tape. Beside him, clutching his hand with fierce trust, was a little boy about Max's age. The child's cheeks were pink from the cold morning air, his hair uncombed, his jacket too thin for the weather. But it was his eyes that made Evelyn's chest tighten. Big, dark eyes that scanned the diner like he was entering a palace he had no right to visit. The man guided his son to a corner booth, half hidden by a support column. They sat down carefully, the boy's feet swinging nervously above the floor. When the waitress approached with her notepad, the man swallowed visibly. Just water, please. For both of us." "Just water?" the waitress asked gently, not unkindly. "You sure, hon?" "Yes, ma'am. Water's fine." Evelyn felt something twist deep in her stomach. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. Years ago, before the insurance money came through, before she worked 3 jobs while Michael underwent chemo, before everything turned around, she remembered that exact tone. The voice of someone trying to maintain dignity, while hunger gnawed at their pride. Max noticed too. Kids notice everything. The waitress brought Max's chocolate pancakes, a glorious stack steaming with powdered sugar and melting butter. Max picked up his fork, then hesitated. His gaze drifted toward the corner booth where the father and son sat staring at their single glass of water. "Mom." Max tugged her sleeve, his voice small and troubled. "That boy's hungry." Evelyn's throat tightened. She followed his gaze and saw the little boy holding a menu, studying the pictures with the kind of reverence usually reserved for storybooks. His father sat with shoulders slightly hunched, one hand wrapped protectively around the water glass, as if it were precious. "Sweetheart," Evelyn whispered. We don't know their situation. But she knew. God, she knew. Max pushed his plate toward the center of the table, his small face serious. Can I give him some? Evelyn looked at her son, really looked at him, his 6-year-old face filled with simple, uncomplicated compassion. No judgment, no hesitation, just pure kindness. Warmth bloomed in her chest. Yes, she said gently, but let's do even better than that. She signaled the waitress and quietly ordered 2 full breakfasts, eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice. Then she stood, Max following with his plate of pancakes, clutched like a treasure. They approached the corner booth. The man looked up, his body tensing immediately. His hand tightened around the water glass. Fear, pride, and hope flickered across his face in rapid succession. Hi, Evelyn said softly. I'm sorry to bother you. We're sitting over there, and my son noticed your little boy. Would you like to join us? We ordered too much food this morning. Her voice was calm, gentle, not pitying, not condescending. Just human. The man blinked, stunned. Oh, no, you don't have to. Max stepped forward, holding out his plate. You can have some of mine. I have chocolate pancakes. They're really good. The little boy's stomach growled audibly in the quiet corner. The sound seemed to break something in the father's resistance. Dad, can we? The boy whispered, eyes wide with hope. The man looked between Evelyn and his son, something crumbling behind his careful walls. Okay, he said finally, voice thick. Thank you. I'm Daniel, he added as they stood. And this is Eli. I'm Evelyn. And this is Max. At their booth, the waitress added extra silverware without a word, her eyes soft with understanding. Evelyn ordered warm milk and a full plate for Eli. The boy sat next to Max, accepting a toy police car that Max offered with the solemnity of a sacred gift. Are you sure? Eli whispered. Yeah, I got lots. Max grinned. You can keep it. Eli's smile lit up his entire face. As the food arrived, Eli ate slowly, carefully, savoring each bite like he was afraid the moment might vanish. Daniel sat across from Evelyn, hands clasped tightly under the table. She noticed a faint tremor in his fingers. Exhaustion, hunger, worry, all written in small details. Do you two live nearby? Evelyn asked gently. Not far, Daniel said, keeping his voice steady. A few miles south. I pick up odd jobs. Yard work, repairs, whatever folks need. That's good work, Evelyn said sincerely. Important work. He shrugged, saying nothing, but something in his posture softened slightly. The boys giggled over the toy car, pushing it back and forth across the table. For a moment, the diner felt like the safest place in the world. Warm food, kind strangers, children laughing. When the bill arrived, Daniel reached quickly for his wallet. You don't need to, Evelyn started. I should at least pay for ours, he said quietly, almost pleading. She placed a gentle hand over his. Please, let me do this. Today is just a nice morning with some new friends. No strings. He hesitated, then slowly withdrew his hand. His eyes softened, though caution still lingered. After they finished, they stepped outside into the crisp autumn air. Max and Eli stood a few feet away, already deep in conversation about playgrounds and toy trucks. One breakfast together, and they become instant friends. Daniel shifted his weight nervously. Thank you again. People don't usually do things like this. Maybe they should, Evelyn said softly. He nodded, looking down. Eli had a good day. He doesn't get many like that. Neither do we, she admitted. A moment passed. Daniel looked like he wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. We go to Memorial Park sometimes. He said finally, the boys might run into each other. We'll be there tomorrow afternoon, Evelyn said gently, giving him a small smile to show there was no pressure. We'll see. Max ran to her side. Mom, can we see Eli again? We'll try, sweetheart. Daniel opened the door of his old car, lifting Eli inside carefully. Before shutting the door, Eli waved his new toy car in the air. Bye, Max. Bye. Max shouted back. Evelyn watched them drive away, the old car sputtering slightly as it turned onto the road. A soft ache rose inside her chest, a mixture of hope and something she didn't dare name yet. As she buckled Max into the SUV, she paused before starting the engine. What a morning, she thought. What a simple thing, to share a meal. And yet it felt like everything. She pulled out of the parking lot, heading home on the long open road. The sun rested low in the sky, warm and golden. Behind them, the diner's bell chimed softly as another family entered. But what lingered was a quiet promise of something beginning, something fragile and human, something sparked by a small act of kindness that felt larger than anyone could imagine. That evening, after tucking Max into bed, Evelyn stood in her hallway for a long moment. The house felt quiet again, but somehow different, like a small flame had been lit inside without her noticing. She didn't know it yet, but that flame would grow, and 6 months from now, It would illuminate truths about her life, her work, and the man she just met that would change everything. The next afternoon, Evelyn and Max arrived at Memorial Park, carrying a soccer ball and quiet hope. They sat on their usual wooden bench while Max scanned every pathway, searching for familiar faces. An hour passed, then another. Maybe they forgot, Max finally said, kicking at a small stone. Maybe, Evelyn replied, though something inside told her it was more complicated than forgetting. They didn't know that Daniel stood outside his apartment that morning, car keys in hand, wrestling with pride and fear. They didn't know he'd almost come 3 times, only to turn back. They didn't know that trusting kindness felt more dangerous than any hardship he'd endured. 3 months later, over the following weeks, a fragile rhythm developed. Daniel and Eli did return to the park, hesitantly at first, then with growing comfort. Sunday afternoons became sacred. The boys played while the adults talked in careful circles, revealing small pieces of themselves. Evelyn learned that Daniel was 32, but carried himself like someone much older. He'd lost his wife in a drunk driving accident when Eli was 2. He told the story in a flat, practiced voice, eyes fixed on the ground. "I'm sorry," Evelyn said softly. "You never really recover," Daniel replied. "You just keep going because you have to." She understood that more than he knew. Daniel learned that Evelyn wasn't just successful, she was powerful. Hart Development Corporation shaped Santa Fe's skyline. But he also learned she was lonely, that her husband had died 3 years ago, that building an empire had been easier than rebuilding a life. They were 2 people who had survived loss by working themselves into exhaustion. And slowly, without either quite realizing it, they were becoming friends. The penthouse. On a cold December morning, Daniel arrived at the most exclusive building in downtown Santa Fe. He'd been hired to clean and prep a penthouse going on the market. The pay was good, better than usual, and he desperately needed it. Rent was increasing again next month. He took the service elevator to the 12th floor, stepped into a space bathed in natural light, and got to work. The penthouse was beautiful but cold. White walls, expensive furniture that looked untouched, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city below. As he scrubbed the kitchen floor, his mind drifted to Evelyn's kitchen. Warm lights, the smell of roasted chicken, the boys' laughter echoing from the next room. The memory made his chest ache. He was on his knees, working on a stubborn stain, when he heard voices approaching. Multiple voices, confident and businesslike. "We need to finalize everything by Friday. The buyer wants to clean clothes." Daniel froze. He knew that voice. The group rounded the corner into the living room. There she was, Evelyn, wearing a navy blue suit that fit perfectly, her hair pinned back professionally, holding a folder and discussing numbers with 4 other people in expensive business attire. She looked powerful, polished, completely in her element. And then she saw him. Their eyes met. Her expression shifted from focused to shocked. Her lips parted slightly. Daniel felt the world tilt. He was on his knees in his old work clothes, dirty rag in hand, in her building, cleaning her floors, while she stood there in her suit, discussing deals worth more money than he'd see in a lifetime. The contrast was devastating. One of the real estate agents frowned. "Is everything all right?" Evelyn stepped forward. "Daniel." But he couldn't hear her. His ears were ringing. His face burned with humiliation, so intense it felt physical. He grabbed his bucket, hand shaking. I need to go." "Daniel, wait." He was already moving toward the stairwell, unable to face the elevator's slow descent. He pushed through the heavy door and started down the concrete stairs, taking them 2 at a time. 12 floors felt endless. At floor 10, he stopped, leaning against the cold wall. His breath came in short gasps. The humiliation crashed over him in waves. "You idiot. You thought she saw you. Really saw you." His hands trembled. He stared at them, rough, calloused, the hands of someone who would never belong in her world. He had let himself forget the distance between them. He had let himself imagine that kindness meant equality. He had been a fool. The silence. Daniel didn't return to Memorial Park that Sunday, or the next, or the one after that. Evelyn's text messages went unanswered. "Daniel, can we talk? I didn't expect to see you there. Are you okay? Please don't pull away. Whatever you're thinking, you're wrong. We miss you." Max asked about Eli every day. But Daniel couldn't face her. Every time he tried to compose a response, he remembered her in that suit, discussing million-dollar properties while he knelt on the floor with a dirty rag. The image haunted him. 3 weeks passed. Max asked every Sunday, "Where's Eli? Did we do something wrong?" Evelyn didn't know how to answer. She sat on their bench, watching families play, and felt grief settle over her, not as sharp as losing Michael, but present nonetheless. The loss of something that could have been. The confrontation. On the 4th Sunday, Evelyn made a decision. That evening, after putting Max to bed, she found the address Daniel had scribbled weeks ago when he'd fixed her porch railing. The next afternoon, she drove to his neighborhood, The houses grew older, more worn. But there was life here. Children's bikes on porches, laundry drying in yards, neighbors chatting on steps. She found his building and climbed the stairs to apartment 2C. Her hand hovered over the door before she knocked gently. A pause. Shuffling sounds. Then the door opened a few inches. Daniel stood there, hair messy, dark circles under his eyes. When he saw her, his face hardened. "Evelyn." "Hi," she said softly. "Can we talk?" He hesitated, conflict flickering in his eyes. Finally, he stepped back and opened the door wider. Max rushed past, finding Eli immediately. The boys disappeared into the bedroom, leaving the adults in tense silence. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You shouldn't have come." "I needed to," she said. He stopped answering. "I didn't know why." "You really don't know?" His voice carried both anger and hurt. She shook her head, fear swelling in her chest. Daniel exhaled sharply. "I saw you. At the penthouse." Evelyn froze. "I was on my knees scrubbing your floors," he continued, pacing, "while you walked in talking about deals and deadlines like it was nothing." He looked at her, eyes burning. "And I realized I'm just someone you help when it makes you feel good." "Daniel, no." "Come on." His laugh was bitter. "You live in a world I don't belong near. I let myself forget that. I let myself think." He stopped, swallowing hard. "It doesn't matter." "It does matter," she said firmly. "It matters to me." He shook his head. "You didn't see me that day." "Not really. You saw numbers, business, money. People like me get pushed out because of decisions you make." The words landed like physical blows. "You're right," she whispered. "And I hate that I've been part of that. I hate that I hurt you." Daniel looked away, jaw clenched. "I didn't pity you," she said quietly, stepping closer. "Not for a second. I admire you. You work harder than anyone I know. You love your son fiercely. You show up every day, even when life keeps knocking you down." His eyes softened slightly, but shame still held him. She reached out gently, taking his hand. He didn't pull away. "I don't care about money," she said. "I don't care about status. I care about you." His chest rose and fell unevenly. "You really mean that?" She nodded, tears gathering. "I do." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel exhaled, a long, trembling breath he seemed to have been holding for years. "I was so scared," he admitted. "I kept thinking you'd realize I'm not enough, that I don't belong next to you." She stepped closer. "You belong right here." His hand moved slowly to her waist, uncertain at first, then firmer. And in that small apartment, surrounded by humble furniture and the sound of children playing, two broken people found their way back to each other. The months after their confrontation brought slow, careful healing. Daniel returned to Memorial Park, though the first few Sundays carried awkwardness neither quite knew how to navigate. But the boys' friendship pulled them forward, and gradually, the adults found their rhythm again. Evelyn started making changes at work, small at first, then more significant. She pushed back against aggressive rent increases. She argued for tenant protections in board meetings. She visited properties personally, meeting the families whose lives her decisions affected. Her colleagues noticed. Some admired her shift. Others grumbled about profits. But she didn't bend this time. "I've seen the human cost," she told her board. "We can be profitable and humane." Daniel's work stabilized through connections Evelyn carefully facilitated. Not handouts, but genuine referrals to people who needed skilled, honest labor. His rent jar grew fuller. The constant fear loosened its grip, even if only slightly. One Saturday evening, Evelyn invited Daniel and Eli to dinner at her home. Daniel hesitated, that old pride flaring, but Eli's excitement won. The dinner was simple: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, laughter. As they ate, Daniel watched Evelyn interact with Eli, the gentle way she corrected his table manners, the warmth in her eyes when she asked about his day. After the boys ran off to play, Daniel helped clear plates. "Thank you," he said quietly. "This meant a lot." "It meant a lot to me, too," she replied. Their hands touched briefly over the sink. Neither pulled away. 6 months later, spring arrived with soft warmth and new growth. Daniel and Evelyn had fallen into something neither quite named, but both felt deeply. A partnership built on shared struggle, mutual respect, and growing love. One warm afternoon at Memorial Park, as the boys played soccer, Evelyn turned to Daniel. "I was thinking," she said carefully, "about my company, about the work we do." He looked at her, sensing something important. "I want to start a different kind of development," she continued. "Affordable housing, real community building, not just luxury penthouses." Daniel's eyes widened. That would be incredible. "I want to hire you," she continued. January 8th, said, "Not as a cleaner, as a project manager. You understand construction, you know what families need, and you've lived reality we'd be serving." He stared at her, speechless. I'm serious, she said. I'll pay for you to get certified, to finish any training you need. You'd be building homes for families like yours. Tears filled his eyes. Evelyn, You don't have to answer now, she said gently. Just think about it. He pulled her into a hug, holding tight. Thank you, he whispered, for seeing me. Always, she replied. 1 year after the diner, they returned to the Sunset Grill on a crisp autumn morning. The same diner where everything had started. It was Evelyn's idea, a way to honor how far they'd come. The bell chimed as they entered. The same waitress smiled in recognition. They slid into the same booth where Evelyn and Max had first sat. What can I get you folks? The waitress asked. Whatever they want, Evelyn said warmly, squeezing Daniel's hand under the table. Daniel ordered confidently. Pancakes for Eli, eggs and bacon for himself, coffee, orange juice. No hesitation, no shame. As they ate, Eli reached across the table, touching Evelyn's wrist. Miss Evelyn, thank you. For what, sweetheart? For helping my dad. For helping us. Her eyes softened. You two helped us too. Daniel looked at her across the table, then at their boys laughing together, and felt peace settle over him. The kind he'd spent years chasing. You know, he said quietly, I used to think families were something other people had. Something I lost. Evelyn reached for his hand. Families can be made, not just born. He nodded. I never thought I'd get another chance. You deserve one. In that moment, in that humble diner where everything began, Daniel understood something profound. Kindness hadn't just fed his son that morning a year ago. It had fed his soul. It had given him hope when he'd forgotten what hope felt like. And now, surrounded by warmth and love and the smell of pancakes, he finally allowed himself to believe in second chances. Epilogue, 2 years later. On a warm summer evening, Daniel and Evelyn stood on the porch of their shared home. Her house had become their house. The boys played in the yard, their laughter floating on the breeze. You know what's funny? Daniel said, 2 years ago, I was too proud to accept kindness. I almost walked away from the best thing that ever happened to me. Evelyn leaned against him. And 2 years ago, I was so busy building an empire, I almost forgot to build a life. He kissed her forehead. We've come a long way. We have. In the distance, the Santa Fe sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. The boys chased fireflies as darkness crept in, and two families that had once been broken had become one. Not perfect, not without struggle, but real and strong and full of the kind of love that grows from small acts of courage and kindness. Because sometimes the most powerful thing in the world is a 6-year-old boy who asks, Mom, can I share? And a mother who says yes.